Let's see you swim now, champion. The maniacal laughter echoed from the bridge as she plummeted into the freezing black river below, head first, the impact like 1,000 knives. Sharp rocks ripped through her leg, blood swirling into the raging current that dragged her under, spinning her mercilessly. She clawed for the surface, lungs burning, but the swollen torrent fought back, fed by storm, hungry for her life. Up on the bridge, they watched, grinning, phones recording her desperate struggle. "She's done," one sneered. "No surfacing this time." But she didn't die. Gasping, broken, she survived the night that was meant to erase her forever. Because winning a race had threatened more than egos. It had exposed a web of corruption, bribes, and power that controlled an entire town. They thought the river would silence her. Instead, it forged her into something unstoppable. She would rise from those depths, not for another medal, but to pull every last one of them under. Judge, sheriff, golden boy, and watch them drown in the truth they tried to bury. The applause trickled in late and uneven across the auditorium of Brookage High that day. It lacked the thunderous swell reserved for the football captain or the homecoming queen. Above the stage, the American flag hung rigid and flawless, its red stripes vivid under the harsh lights. Beneath it stood Kailani Reeves, 17, slender-shouldered, dark-skinned, clad in a borrowed blazer that hung awkwardly on her frame. Golden goggles draped around her neck like a silent challenge. She offered no immediate smile. Kailani simply held her ground, straight-backed, chin steady, hands composed, gaze fixed ahead, in the poised stance of a swimmer and the guarded restraint of a survivor. The principal cleared his throat and read stiffly from his card. "The Athlete of the Year award goes to Kailani Reeves for shattering the state freestyle record and being a top contender for a full university scholarship at regionals." A scattering of cheers broke out. A few more claps echoed hesitantly. Then the murmurs began. "Isn't she from over by the old rail yard? Guess they're really pushing diversity this year." Well, records are records, I suppose. Kailani caught every word. She always did. Teachers forced tight smiles. School board members leaned in, whispering behind cupped hands. A woman in pearls, someone's influential mother, tilted her head and remarked, just loud enough to carry, "I didn't know swimming counted for this much now." Kailani accepted the plaque and envelope with both hands. The gold lettering shone brightly. Athlete of the Year, her name spelled right for once. Her mind flashed to pre-dawn practices in a dimly lit pool, to cracked fingertips and chlorine-stung skin, to her father counting worn bills at the kitchen table while masking his sighs, to racing not only the clock but the unspoken burden that declared she didn't belong here. From the third row, Prescott Vandermeer offered no applause. 17, white, broad-shouldered, with the sort of trustworthy face that won favor before he spoke. He wore his varsity jacket indoors, the letter emblazoned bold and proud across his chest. Captain of the boys' swim team, son of Judge Harlan Vandermeer, Brookage royalty. Prescott's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. This wasn't how it was meant to unfold. His grandfather's name etched the trophy case by the pool. His father's portrait dominated the downtown courthouse. The Vandermeers didn't lose. They didn't settle for second. And they certainly didn't watch scholarships destined for their own handed to a girl from a single-bay garage on the wrong side of town. Behind him, Riker Thorne leaned forward, confusion etched across his broad features. Big kid, heavy hands, loyal without question. "Man," Riker muttered, "I thought this was yours, Press." "It is," Prescott hissed through gritted teeth. "It was." The applause finally built to something vaguely convincing. Kailani stepped from the podium. As she passed the front row, she glimpsed envy sharp as a blade, green-eyed, venomous, alive. She didn't glance back.
The ceremony dissolved into murmurs and movement. Chairs scraped against the floor. Parents collected coats. Teachers offered congratulations to the usual handful of favorites. Kailani navigated it all like water, quiet, unstoppable. The hallway beyond the auditorium felt narrower, dimly lit. Trophy cases lined the walls, showcasing faces that seldom resembled hers. She had taken only a few steps when a figure blocked her path, Prescott. He positioned himself with effortless authority. Riker Thorne loomed just behind, a mindless shadow. A cluster of students slowed, drawn by the tension. Prescott smiled, but the expression stopped short of his eyes. "Got to admit," he said, voice smooth and pitched to carry, "you swim fast. Guess that comes from your dad's genes, huh?" Kailani halted, meeting his gaze directly. "Which genes?" she asked, calm and unflinching. "The ones for running from cops?" Prescott replied. Laughter rippled from somewhere behind Riker. "Must help in the water." The hallway fell silent. Phones emerged. Someone whispered her name. Heat rose in Kailani, but she held her ground. "I swim fast," she said, voice clear and even, "because I work twice as hard to outpace those born at the finish line who still finish second." A collective sharp inhale sliced the quiet. Prescott's smile fractured. Riker blinked, lagging behind. Prescott wasn't. He closed the distance, near enough that Kailani caught the scent of chlorine mixed with costly cologne. His tone lowered, laced with venom and intimacy. "You think you won something today?" "I know I did," Kailani replied. Nervous electric laughter fluttered down the corridor. Prescott's face flushed crimson, then paled. The world he commanded had just defied him. He leaned closer, lips barely moving. "You'll never touch that scholarship." Kailani offered no reply. She didn't need to. She moved past him, shoulders squared, steps deliberate and unhurried. Behind him, Prescott remained frozen, humiliation festering into something darker, more perilous. As she rounded the corner, she caught his whisper, not to Riker, not to the onlookers, but to the vow hardening in his chest. "This isn't over." Kailani pushed through the doors into the fading afternoon light, clutching her plaque tightly, oblivious to how the threat she had just inherited weighed far more than any award. The Vandermeer house never felt like a home. It felt like a courthouse that never adjourned.
Marble floors gleamed under chandelier lights so piercing it stung the eyes. Family portraits marched along the walls, men in severe dark suits, women locked in rehearsed smiles. Each frame murmured the same unspoken creed: "We win. We always have." Prescott Vandermeer stepped through the front door and tugged loose his tie, hands still unsteady from the humiliation he dragged in with him. He managed only a few strides before the voice cut from the study. "Come in." Prescott obeyed. Judge Harlan Vandermeer stood at the window, posture ramrod straight, hands clasped behind his back. He did not turn. He never needed to. In Brookage, disgrace spread faster than wildfire when it touched the wrong name. "You came in second," Harlan said, voice calm as polished stone. Prescott swallowed hard. "I broke my personal best." Harlan turned at last. His eyes were pale, exacting, devoid of warmth. "Second," he echoed. "The Vandermeer name does not trail anyone, least of all some garage girl." Prescott's chest constricted. "She broke a state record." Harlan advanced a step. "Do not defend her under my roof." The silence that followed weighed heavier than any outburst. Harlan lifted a framed photograph from the desk. Prescott at 12, swim cap comically oversized, eaming beside a trophy nearly his height. "That scholarship isn't about money," Harlan said. "It's about lineage, continuity, proof that our bloodline still commands respect." "I can still take it," Prescott answered quickly. "Regionals are tomorrow." Harlan's jaw set like granite. "You've already lost face. Fail again and you'll pack your bags. I will not harbor disappointment." The words struck like a verdict.
Prescott stared at the floor. Public praise had been his constant companion. In private, he had learned fear young, not from fists or bruises, but from something far colder, conditional love honed to a razor's edge. You are not special because you swim. You are special because of your name. Do not tarnish it again. Prescott nodded once. Get out of my sight. He left the study, spine rigid, rage coiling inward rather than erupting. By the time he reached his room, the face in the mirror seemed foreign, eyes fever bright, mouth drawn thin. Across town, the Reeves garage carried the familiar bite of oil and scorched metal. Jackson Reeves wiped grease from his hands on a rag as Kehlani stepped inside, plaque cradled carefully beneath her arm like something breakable. The space was modest, one lift, one cracked window, tools aligned on a pegboard mended more times than replaced. "You're late," Jackson said, glancing up. Then he spotted the plaque and stilled. Kehlani extended it toward him. "Athlete of the Year." For a long moment, Jackson said nothing. Then a quiet, incredulous laugh escaped him, and he drew her into an embrace that smelled of hard work, sweat, and unwavering safety. "I knew it. I always knew." Kehlani leaned into him, exhaustion finally seeping through. They didn't like it. Jackson never asked who they were. He simply nodded. They never do. He poured 2 sodas in the chipped mugs. They settled on overturned crates, the garage humming softly around them. "You did good. No one can take that from you." Kehlani studied the plaque once more. She wondered how long that truth would hold. That night, Prescott found no sleep. By morning, his anger demanded release. He located Riker Thorne behind the bleachers, crushing an empty can beneath his boot. Riker was built large and broad, perpetually scowling, someone who borrowed shape from whatever strength stood nearest. "You hear about yesterday?" Riker asked. Prescott offered no reply. He simply drew out his phone and displayed a screenshot of Kehlani with the plaque. Riker snorted. "School loves a charity case." Prescott studied him closely. "You hate her." Riker's expression darkened. "Her old man cost my family everything." Prescott arched a brow. "My dad worked at that garage. One mistake, one missing box of parts. Jackson Reeves ran his mouth to the cops. My dad lost his job, we lost the house, and now everyone treats that man like a saint." Something clicked into place for Prescott. "So you want her gone?" Riker nodded. "I want her hurt." They lingered there, the school rising behind them like a silent conspirator. Prescott slipped a hand into his jacket and withdrew a small plastic packet of fine white powder. "Regionals at Harrow," he said. "She wins those, the scholarship's sealed." Riker stared at the packet. "What is that?" "Enough to keep her out of the water." Riker smiled slowly. Prescott pressed it into his palm. "Make sure she never touches that pool again." Riker closed his fist around it. As they walked away, neither glanced back toward the garage across town, where Kehlani slept, unaware that the gears of envy had at last begun to turn. The air inside Brookage's pool crackled with electric anticipation. The stands brimmed with students, parents, and teachers. Every splash, every whistle, every burst of cheers reverberated off blue tiles and glass.
Banners swayed from the rafters, yet no voice rose in cheer for Kehlani Reeves. She entered the natatorium alone, head held high, eyes sweeping the stands for any face she could trust. She willed herself to tune out the whispers. She probably can't swim without those fancy goggles. Watch her swim up today. Charity cases always do. Kehlani centered on her breathing, on the steady thrum of her pulse. It was supposed to be just another race, but an indefinable wrongness hung in the air. Her footsteps echoed across the slick concrete as she headed to the locker room. Inside, the sharp bite of chlorine could not overpower the acrid tang of her own fear. Kehlani froze. Her locker gaped open, the lock shattered. Panic clawed at her throat. She reached in. Her racing suit, the one Jackson had scrimped months to buy, lay in tatters, deliberately slashed and ruined. Her towel slumped in a heap. It appeared ordinary at first glance, but when she lifted it,
A harsh, gritty odor seared her nostrils. She let it fall at once. A powdery residue clung to her fingers. Her skin prickled, a rash blooming where it touched. A stifled laugh drifted from beyond the bank of lockers. Kaylani knew that laugh. Riker Thorne. She scrubbed her hands furiously, heart hammering. Time was slipping away. Her old practice suit, faded, stretched thin, was all that remained. She pulled it on, ignoring how the straps hung loose, how vulnerable it left her compared to the others. "Let's go, Reeves." Coach Stratton's voice rang impatient down the tiled hallway. "You're in lane 4. Move." She shoved the destroyed suit and contaminated towel back into the locker, commanding her hands to steady. The memory of her father's weary yet hopeful eyes surfaced. She would not let these cowards rob her of this race. Out on the deck, the roar was deafening. Prescott Vandermeer sauntered past in his pristine new suit, every muscle posed for admiration. He sneered loud enough for the crowd. "Nice outfit, Reeves. Did you pull that from Lost and Found? Or does your dad patch those up for spare change?" Laughter followed, not only from Prescott, but from those eager to align with him. Riker Thorne grinned broadly, nudging a teammate. "She ought to be grateful we even let her in the pool. They say bleach is for scrubbing floors, not wearing." Kaylani locked eyes with Prescott. "You better swim fast, Vandermeer. Losing to me once was embarrassing. Lose twice, and maybe they'll etch your name on that broken locker." Prescott's smirk soured. He turned away, unwilling to display open fury before witnesses. Coach Stratton glanced at Kaylani, expression inscrutable. Then Bart, "Lane 4, take your mark." Kaylani mounted the block. The world narrowed to a gleaming lane of blue, cool and boundless. She pushed aside the sting on her skin, the ill-fitting suit that felt more menace than protection. The whistle pierced the air. She launched forward, arms slicing clean, legs driving hard. For those fleeting seconds, nothing existed but the surge of water and the fire in her lungs. Every taunt, every sabotage, every stolen moment ignited her strokes. She swam with fury, yet flawless form. At the far wall, her fingertips touched first. The board flashed her name and time, a new school record. This win seals it. The scholarship is mine now. Lane 4, Reeves, 152.31. The crowd held its breath for a beat, then offered only scattered, stunned applause, nothing more. Coach Stratton allowed the ghost of a proud smile. Prescott hauled himself from lane 5, chest heaving, face flushed scarlet. Riker Thorne scowled, avoiding her gaze. Kaylani climbed out, legs unsteady. She did not celebrate. Instead, she returned to the locker room, sweat and chlorine mingling on her skin. Victory belonged to her, but the hush of the stands cut deeper than defeat. The locker room lay dim and deserted, save for Riker Thorne leaning against the sinks, arms crossed, and Prescott Vandermeer slamming the door behind him. "Think you're tough now?" Prescott spat, advancing. "Think you can humiliate me in front of everyone?" Riker blocked the exit, fists balled. Kaylani lowered her bag slowly, refusing to yield ground. "I don't need to humiliate you, Prescott. You manage that perfectly well yourself." Riker shrugged her shoulder harder than necessary. "Watch your mouth. You just got lucky out there." Kaylani straightened, spine unbowed. "Luck didn't shred my suit, Riker. Luck didn't lace my towel with poison. That was you. And that's all you'll ever be, weak, cowering behind someone stronger." Prescott's eyes flared. His hand rose as if to strike, but the door burst open. Mrs. Winslow's sharp voice sliced the air. "What is going on here?" Prescott whirled, rage instantly masked by innocence. "Nothing, ma'am, just congratulating Kaylani on her race." Mrs. Winslow wasn't fooled. Her stare lingered on Riker's clenched fists, on Prescott's counterfeit smile. Out now. As they slipped past, Prescott leaned close, whispered dripping venom. "Pool water safe, Reeves. Wait till you try the river." Kaylani met his gaze without flinching. She refused to grant him the satisfaction of fear. As Prescott and Riker vanished, Kehlani understood she had endured far more than a race, and that the true danger now lay beyond lifeguards and lane lines. Her shoes struck the cracked pavement as she left the school behind. Twilight bleeded across the sky. The departing storm had left the air raw and biting, a cold that wormed beneath the skin and lingered.
Each streetlight flickered uncertainly, her sole companion on the solitary walk home. She was exhausted to the core, body and spirit weighed down, yet she pressed on, one deliberate step after another, because survival demanded nothing less. The engine's rumble escaped her notice until it was upon her. The pickup's growl tore through the gathering dusk, headlights raking across her back. Kehlani flinched as the battered truck veered sharply, cutting off her path. The door banged open. Riker Thorne leaped out first, boots thudding heavily, eyes dull and vacant. Prescott followed, cloaked in his varsity swagger and a far uglier shadow. "Evening, Reeves," Prescott called, his voice thick with fury. "Late for your run or just hunting trouble?" Kehlani kept her composure steady, refusing to betray fear. "Just heading home, Prescott. Don't you have better places to be?" Riker circled behind her, his massive frame transforming the narrow bridge into an inescapable snare. "Maybe she's lost. Maybe she's considering a jump," he sneered. Prescott advanced, movements jerky, knuckles pale around a glinting object in his grip. A switchblade. The steel sprang free with a chilling snap that prickled Kehlani's skin. "Congratulations, gold medalist," Prescott hissed. "You claimed your shiny trophy, your name in the headlines, but that was meant for me. It was always supposed to be me." Kehlani's heart pounded wildly. She compelled her words to remain even and deliberate. "Prescott, think about this. You're not just some furious kid. You're the judge's son. You'd throw it all away for this, for nothing." Her plea only fueled his rage like oil on flames. He lunged, driving her back step by step until her spine met the frigid metal railing. Wind lashed her hair across her face. Below, the river churned like a black serpent, gloated and ferocious. "You know what sickens me?" Prescott spat. "People like you invading spaces you don't belong, stealing what's ours, pretending you're superior when everyone knows your kind is just noise in someone else's tail." Kehlani spotted Riker pulling out his phone, camera fixed on her. He grinned, ravenous for the show. "Smile for the audience, Reeves. Let them witness what happens when the charity case steps out of bounds." She battled to steady her breath, her voice resolute. "This isn't you, Prescott. You think harming me will mend what's shattered at home? That your father would love you more if you destroy your future?" Prescott's hand trembled. "Don't mention my father." His voice fractured, shrill with dread and loathing. "He'd prefer no son over a failure. That's what you've turned me into. You made me nothing." Kehlani attempted reason once more, but he only pressed closer, eyes feral. "Want to see what nothing truly is? How simple it is to vanish, Reeves?" Riker chuckled behind the lens. "Send it to her dad, yeah? Show him how fast his little fish drowns outside her safe pool." Prescott loomed over her, blade gleaming inches from her throat. "I could finish this now," he seethed. "And you know what? They'd erect a monument to me before your body ever surfaced." Kehlani's hands clutched the railing. Her thoughts raced, desperate for escape. She held his stare, seeking any remnant of the boy he once was, but found only a tempest unraveling. She steadied herself, speaking softly. "Do this, and there's no return. You'll become just another scandal. Judge's son squanders everything. That's the legacy they'll recall." But Prescott was beyond reach. His features contorted with a hatred vast as the world itself, not confined to one boy. "I won't lose it all. Not if no one ever finds you." His scream reverberated across the bridge. "I've got nothing left if you're erased." Riker's laughter grew piercing, bouncing off the water. He zoomed closer, phone quivering with glee.
Say goodbye, Reeves. Show us a gold medalist swim with a snapped neck. Kehlani pressed harder against the railing, the chill biting deep, the drop vertigo-inducing. The river below bellowed its ascent. Prescott took that final step, blade flashing perilously near. In that instant, Kehlani knew she stood utterly isolated, armed only with composure and words that crumbled useless before such monstrosity.
For a suspended heartbeat, silence reigned save for the relentless thunder of the swollen river and Riker Thorne's fevered snicker behind the lens. Prescott Vandermeer towered over her, lips curled in a feral snarl devoid of any lingering boyhood. The knife glinted one final time in the dying dusk before he slipped it away, freeing his hands for raw violence. His chest rose and fell in ragged heaves. Humiliation, rage, and raw terror churned within him, emotions too vast for mere words. He bared his teeth and roared, "Let's see you swim, gold medalist!" The shout crocked like a pistol shot. Before Kehlani could steel herself, Prescott's palms crashed into her shoulders. The world upended. Sky, bridge, headlights, Riker's manic grin all blurred into chaos before giving way to empty air. She plummeted headfirst over the railing, legs flailing uselessly, her cries ripped away by the howling wind. 10 meters below, the river lay in wait. Kehlani struck the surface with a brutal impact that reverberated through every bone. Icy shock pierced her to the marrow. In an instant, a submerged rock seized her shin, sending a blaze of white-hot agony surging upward. She inhaled sharply. Foul river water flooded her mouth, carrying the metallic tang of mud and blood. The cold clamped around her chest like iron bands. Her lungs seized in protest. She fought to break the surface, kicking desperately, but her right leg refused to respond. Pain exploded in crimson bursts behind her eyes. The current seized her, twisting her body like a discarded puppet. Arms slashing wildly, panic tearing at her insides, she battled the monstrous torrent. Tonight the river was alive with fury. It surged and bucked, hauling her downward, spinning her mercilessly. Fed by the storm, it hurled her against splintered debris and gnarled branches hidden below. Up and down dissolved into nothingness. The depths yawned absolute, suffocating, infinite. For a moment, vision failed entirely, only impenetrable black. Her ears rang with the deafening surge, the violent crash of water on rock. Somewhere far above, faint laughter seemed to echo. She broke the surface once, twice gulping air laced with blood's coppery bite. Limbs aflame with exhaustion, her mind howled to surrender, to release her grip and let the river claim her. Yet deeper still, an iron resolve surfaced. She was more than a swimmer. She was Jackson Reeves's daughter. Memories flooded, her father's scarred hands coaxing life from broken machines, every dawn battle to secure a lane, every race they swore she would lose. Kehlani clawed upward, driving with her uninjured leg, hauling her battered frame through the churning froth. A drifting log spun close, it slammed her ribs, yet she seized it, gasping raggedly. The river clawed to reclaim her. Arms weakening, fingers numbing, the log nearly wrenched free. Cold burrowed deeper, gnawing at her bones. High on the bridge, Riker's phone continued recording. Prescott's silhouette bent over the railing, eyes gleaming with savage satisfaction. "She's finished," he declared, voice thick with dark exhilaration. "Finished for good." Riker could barely contain his glee. "Let's go, Press. She ain't surfacing." They turned, laughter fading as a deep rumble shattered the night. Tires screeched on wet asphalt. Riker halted abruptly, phone clattering to the ground. A massive Harley-Davidson thundered toward them, headlamp slicing the gloom. It fishtailed to a stop at the bridge's end, steel and chrome flashing even in the waning light. The rider's outline was colossal, bearded, broad-shouldered, leather vest taut across a powerful chest. Emblazoned on his back, the unmistakable winged skull of the Hells Angels.
Prescott swallowed hard, his bravado evaporating. The biker dismounted with deliberate weight, rising like an enraged bear. He pierced the boys with a stare that stripped souls bare, exposing every festering rot within. Down in the river, Kehlani's strength ebbed perilously. Vision tunneled to a narrowing slit, gray sky, her father's distant voice, the river's savage roar. Her hold slackened, she began to sink, the world dissolving into silent blue. Yet the final sounds to reach her before oblivion claimed her were the motorcycle's thunderous approach, the shriek of brakes, and Riker's voice splintering in sudden terror. "Press, we gotta run, now!" Above, Prescott's fading laughter drowned beneath the engine's bellow and the arrival of something infinitely more perilous than police, judge, or buried secret. A true reckoning had descended.
Magnus Blaze Kerrigan's arrival struck the boys like a seismic wave. He embodied an unbreakable barrier of command, beard bristling, leather vest strained across a torso forged in conflict. His scarred face projected an ancient, unyielding certainty that transcended near fear. Behind him, two more bikers rumbled to a halt, boots grinding against asphalt, gazes icy and razor-sharp. These were no casual riders. They were veterans of infernal depths who had clawed their way back. Riker Thorne's phone slipped from his grasp, mouth gaping soundlessly. Prescott Vandermeer hunted for his customary smirk, but managed only a faltering stammer. "What the hell do you want, old man?" Magnus offered no reply. His eyes swept the bridge in a single sweeping assessment, taking in the churning water below, the faint silhouette battling the current, jaw locking with grim resolve. A subtle tilt of his chin served as silent order. At once, his companions shed their vests and bolted toward the riverbank, plunging into the inky torrent without hesitation. On the bridge, Magnus pivoted back to the boys. Prescott attempted bravado. "You don't know who my father is. Touch me and you're done." Magnus advanced, eclipsing them both in stature. "You just hurled a girl off a bridge. Your daddy's name means nothing here. You'll answer for it now." Prescott's hand darted to his pocket. Steel flashed, a trembling, desperate menace. Riker pressed himself against the truck, tears already brimming. But Magnus moved faster than panic. His grip clamped Prescott's wrist like forged iron. A sharp twist ground bone on bone. Prescott shrieked. The knife rang against the pavement. "Never draw on a man unless you're prepared to bleed," Magnus growled low. Then, with effortless menace, he hoisted Prescott by the jacket single-handed, boots kicking air as the boy's swagger shattered into raw terror. "Put me down! I'll sue you! You can't— My dad—" Magnus drove him against the truck, not shattering bone, but imprinting the impact deep in flesh and memory. Riker whimpered, courage evaporated. In the struggle, Prescott's backpack ripped open under Magnus's shake. Out tumbled not textbooks, but dense bundles of cash, wads of 20s, 50s, hundreds. Atop the pile landed a black leather-bound ledger, its cover weathered by time and concealed truths. The sight drained every drop of color from Prescott's face. Eyes bulging in pure dread, he lunged. "Give that back!" he gasped. "You don't understand. That's not— Just return it!" His plea escalated to a shriek as he clawed at Magnus's arm, but the biker repelled him with casual force. Magnus deposited Prescott roughly on the ground and crouched to retrieve the ledger. He turned it in his calloused hands, thumb tracing the edges, sensing the weight of its buried sins. Prescott watched, chest heaving, gaze riveted as though his entire existence balanced on that worn volume. From the riverbank came a shout. One biker surfaced, hauling a limp figure from the surge. Kehlani, pallid, hair matted to her face, frame contorted in agony. The second emerged gasping, bracing her shattered leg. Blood oozed from a deep laceration above her knee. Magnus moved with practiced urgency, kneeling beside her, fingers seeking pulse, cradling her head with unexpected tenderness.
Her lips tinged blue, yet she coughed violently, expelling river water. "Stay with me, girl. Stay with me." Kehlani's eyes fluttered open, confusion battling torment. The world swam, unfamiliar faces, leather, gleaming chrome, and the relentless throb in her limb. On the bridge, Riker slumped to the ground, ashen and trembling. "We didn't mean, she was just supposed to," Riker's words tumbled out. "She's always flaunting, making us look weak." Magnus paid him no mind. He rose to his full height, ledger raised. His gaze shifted between the boys, voice rolling like approaching thunder. "You still don't grasp it. This ceased being mere bullying the moment you tried to silence her permanently." Prescott attempted a snarl. It emerged a pathetic whine. "My dad will bury you, all of you." His eyes flicked frantically to the ledger, desperation eclipsing defiance. Magnus's stare ignited. Let him try. He gestured toward Kehlani on the grass, fighting for breath, shivering uncontrollably. "You chose the wrong girl, the wrong town, and most certainly the wrong opponents." Riker crumpled to his knees. "Please, we only wanted to scare her." Magnus ignored the plea entirely. He fixed on Prescott. "You believe a judge's son is invincible? Out here, the river spares no one, no matter how wealthy the father." Behind them, the bikers tended Kehlani, draping her in a jacket, staunching her wound with a pressed shirt. Distant sirens wailed faintly, growing nearer. Someone had summoned aid, or perhaps the town was at last confronting its shadows. Magnus crouched before Prescott, ledger firm in hand, voice dropping to a deadly murmur. "You interfered with the daughter of a man to whom I owe my life. Cross her path again, and you'll pray to have remained at the river's bottom." Prescott's eyes widened. Arrogance finally yielded to terror. Magnus rose, turning the ledger thoughtfully. "I won't end you. I'll leave that to your father once he learns what you've cost him." He tucked the ledger inside his vest. The words struck like final judgment. Riker, convulsing, crawled aside and retched beside the truck. Kehlani coughed weakly, body curled against the pain, yet her eyes held a defiant spark, an ember no deluge could extinguish. Magnus rested a massive, steadying hand on her shoulder. Tone softened. "You're safe now. We've got you." Overhead, clouds devoured the remaining light. Below, the bikers stood vigilant sentinel, shielding Kehlani from the encroaching night. Prescott slumped broken against the truck. Riker sobbed nearby as sirens swelled, a harbinger that the night's buried truths would soon flood far beyond Old Creek Bridge. And as Magnus observed the boys, ledger secure against his chest, he knew this marked only the beginning. Harsh hospital lights pierced Kehlani's earlids. For an instant she drifted between realms, a sterile bed and the river's roar, the crushing weight of water, the faint warmth of a hand anchoring hers. Sounds filtered in next. The quiet hum of monitors, the subdued murmur of voices, the distant thud of heavy boots on linoleum. When Kehlani's eyes at last fluttered open, the first sight that greeted her was her father. Jackson Reeves sat hunched beside the bed, his rough, calloused hands enveloping hers as though anchoring her to the world of the living. His eyes, bloodshot from sleepless vigil, sparked with fierce life the instant he sensed her awakening. He said nothing at first, only tightened his grip, battling a tide of relief and anguish that threatened to spill over. Kehlani tried to speak, but her throat felt scorched raw. She managed a faint, pained smile. "Hey, Dad." Jackson's voice emerged like gravel. "Hey, baby girl. You scared the hell out of me." She shifted slightly, only for agony to lance through her leg and side, a savage reminder of what she had endured. Her gaze drifted downward to the thick bandages, the rigid cast encasing her from thigh to ankle. Panic surged sharp in her chest. "My leg, Dad. Am I—" Jackson shook his head, voice unsteady yet resolute. "The doctors are doing all they can. You're here. That's everything." The door swung open, accompanied by the deep rumble of boots. 3 men filled the threshold, clad in leather and denim, radiating unspoken vow. Magnus Blaze Carrigan led them, a towering figure in black, the Hell's Angels patch blazing across his broad back. His companions, equally formidable, held position by the door like silent guardians. The room seemed to contract under the weight of their quiet, unbreakable presence, a brotherhood tempered in peril. Magnus stepped closer, his voice unexpectedly gentle beneath the gruff exterior. "You're tougher than most Marines I've known, Kehlani. Welcome back." Fragments of memory assaulted her, the bridge, the freezing plunge, lungs burning for air, flashing and fading like ghosts. She recalled the terror, the pain, the final glimpse of leather and gleaming chrome before oblivion took her. Jackson rose, cautious yet profoundly grateful. "Thank you, all of you. I don't even know how." Magnus dismissed it with a curt shake of his head. "Save the thanks. Not yet." A doctor entered then, middle-aged, eyes weary behind wrinkled scrubs. He checked her vitals, shone a penlight into her eyes, and spoke in the measured, careful tone reserved for grave truths. "You're fortunate to be alive, Kehlani. Your leg sustained a compound fracture. Surgery was successful, but rehabilitation will be lengthy. I must be frank, returning to competitive swimming may no longer be possible. The damage is extensive." The words struck like boulders. Kehlani stared at the ceiling, struggling to steady her voice. Jackson's grasp tightened until his knuckles blanched, his jaw clenched, grief flashing to fury before hardening into steely determination. The doctor's gaze softened, but survival itself is a miracle. He departed, leaving a heavy silence broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor. Magnus leaned against the window, arms crossed. "You know, Kehlani, you've got more grit than anyone in this town. That's no accident. It comes straight from your old man." Confusion threaded through her pain. Why are you all here?" Magnus glanced at Jackson, a knowing half-smile tugging at his beard. "Your father isn't just the finest mechanic around. Years back, overseas, he was Green Beret, Special Forces. He saved my life and the lives of a dozen brothers in a hellhole most maps don't even name. We swore an oath that day. If he ever called, we'd answer. He'd never stand alone." Kehlani stared at her father, awe and revelation colliding. You never told me." Jackson looked worn, yet a quiet pride eased the lines of his face. "Didn't want you feeling you had anything to prove." Magnus's deep voice rolled on. "That's why we're here. Brotherhood isn't just talk. It's a debt repaid in blood and loyalty. No one touches brother's family." Tears stung Kehlani's eyes, the revelation overwhelming. Her quiet, steadfast father, scarred hands and all, was a hero these men would ride through fire to protect. The ground beneath her shifted, old wounds mingling with newfound strengths. Jackson gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "You never needed to be strong for anyone else, kid, but you're never alone." Magnus cleared his throat and drew something from inside his vest, the black leather-bound ledger, the very one Prescott had guarded so desperately. He passed it to Jackson, expression solemn. "Found this with the boys who did this to her. Haven't opened it, but it reeks of trouble." Jackson accepted it, feeling its ominous heft. He glanced at Kehlani, then flipped the cover. Page after page revealed meticulous entries, names, figures, sums, initials of men he knew all too well from town. Teachers, coaches, and topping the list, Judge Harlan Vandermeer. Just below, Principal Lockwood. Color drained from Jackson's face. This isn't mere gambling. These are bribes, payoffs. They're laundering through the school. Kehlani's whisper barely cut the air. "Dad, that's why he wanted me gone." Jackson met Magnus's gaze, jaw locked. "This runs deeper than us, deeper than the pool. It's the whole rotten system." Magnus nodded, features grim. "We'll need every hand." As Jackson closed the ledger, Kaylani squeezed his fingers, a spark reigniting within her. She was no longer merely a victim. She was a witness, and the battle had only begun. Out in the corridor, boots shifted restlessly, low voices conferring. The Brotherhood awaited direction, ready for justice, for truth to surface at last. Deep within, Kaylani Reeves knew she would never yield to the dark. The sun had scarcely cleared the rooftops when the hospital's fragile peace shattered under the sharp cadence of boots echoing down the hallway.
Kalani's room, until then shielded by the silent vigilance of the bikers and the fragile hope of a battered family, suddenly became the arena for a new menace, this one cloaked in the authority of the badge. Sheriff Calder strode in with the arrogant swagger of a man who believed the world bent to his kind. His tan uniform was impeccably pressed, every badge gleaming. Behind gold-rimmed glasses, his eyes were cold and self-satisfied, like a predator assessing cornered prey. Flanking him were two young deputies, both visibly ill at ease, both far more concerned with earning Calder's favor than pursuing truth. Jackson rose instantly at the intrusion, every sense sharpened. Magnus shifted from the window, arms folded across his chest in unyielding defiance. Calder dispensed with any pretense of courtesy. "Morning, folks. A shame we meet under such tragic circumstances." His gaze swept the room, barely grazing Kalani, as if she were merely an occupant, not a person. Instead, it settled on Magnus, lips curling in disdain. "You," he said, jabbing a finger, "stand up." Magnus complied with deliberate slowness. "How can I assist you, Sheriff?" Calder brandished a sheet of paper like a prized warrant. "I hold a sworn statement from Prescott Vandermeer. It claims you assaulted him, threatened his life, and endangered a minor. That's felony assault, attempted battery on a child." His voice rose deliberately, carrying to the deputies and any ears in the hallway. "You're under arrest." Kalani drew a sharp breath, but Magnus remained immovable. "Your nephew's lying. Everyone on that bridge witnessed the truth." Calder's sneer deepened. "My nephew is a respected citizen. Yours, hardly." He motioned to one deputy, who advanced hesitantly. "Seize all evidence. The judge demands everything, especially anything recovered from the scene." His stare fixed on Jackson, gleaming with predatory intent. "Hand it over, now." Jackson, ledger clutched close, met the sheriff's glare with the unflinching calm of a man who had faced death and refused to blink. "You have a warrant, Sheriff." Calder smirked, closing the distance until the Clausian mix of aftershave and menace hung between them. "I'm the law here. When I say I need it, you surrender it, or you both walk out in cuffs." Magnus tensed, but Jackson stepped forward, placing himself squarely in Calder's path, voice low and lethal. "That's not how the law operates. Want evidence? Get a judge's signature on a warrant. Until then, nothing leaves this room." The deputies wavered, trapped between their superior's command and the unshakable conviction in Jackson's tone. Calder leaned in until only Jackson could hear. "Don't grow bold. Think your old war tales impress here? You're nothing but a grease monkey from the wrong side of the tracks. I can ensure you never open that garage again. You, your daughter, your friends, erased like you never existed." Jackson's eyes narrowed, his calm the stillness before a tempest. "Ever left this town, Calder? Ever stared down a man with nothing left to lose?" The sheriff recoiled slightly, unsettled by the forged steel resolve. Jackson pressed closer, voice a gravelly rumble. "I've tracked men twice your viciousness, buried some, watched others flee. Play at danger if you like, but never threaten my family again." A thick silence descended. The deputies fidgeted, uncertain.
A clear line etched itself between corrupt power and raw courage. Magnus, reading the tension, offered a chill smile. "Sheriff, if you're hunting trouble, you found abundance here." Calder's sneer faltered, his bravado ringing hollow. "This isn't finished. I'll claim what I came for. Depend on it." He wheeled about, signaling the deputies to withdraw. At the threshold, he paused for one parting barb. "Remember, Reeves, men like you are always one misstep from vanishing." Jackson watched him depart, jaw locked, ledger pressed firmly to his chest. When the door clicked shut, Magnus exhaled slowly, fists relaxing. "They're frightened. That's why they're pressing so hard." Kalani regarded her father with fresh vision, not merely as a parent, but as an unbreakable bulwark against the world's cruelest blows. She knew the battle had truly begun. In the parking lot, Calder slammed his fist against the cruiser, rage boiling over. He dialed the number, tone icy and venomous. He refused. "They've got the ledger. Rally everyone. We seize it tonight." Back inside the hospital, Jackson turned to Magnus, resolve etched in every line. "They're coming. They won't stop until they reclaim it. We move now." Magnus nodded, his brothers already assembling in the corridor, prepared for whatever followed. The war had emerged from the shadows, pitted between a brotherhood sworn to truth and a system decayed to its roots. This time, Jackson Reeves was not retreating. He was holding the line.
The abandoned warehouse crouched in desolate silence at the town's ragged edge, its shattered windows gaping like hollow sockets, corrugated iron walls etched deep by decades of unrelenting rain. Prescott Vandermeer's footsteps reverberated as he edged inside, shoulders curled against the piercing midnight cold that seeped through every crack. The moon offered only a slender sliver of silver, veiled behind restless clouds that drifted like unspoken threats. His father stood waiting in the enveloping dark, posture inflexible as always, suit immaculate despite the squalor, a testament to how power redefined its own limits. Judge Harlan Vandermeer had no place in ruins like this, yet authority bent reality to its will. Two shattered figures in black flanked the distant exit, faces obscured beneath low brims, hands resting idly yet meaningfully near concealed holsters. Riker Thorne hovered uneasily by the entrance, gnawing relentlessly at his thumbnail, flinching at every faint rustle from the night outside. Regret had already taken root. He wished desperately he had never come. Prescott leveled a scathing glare at him. "Don't just stand there gawking. Shut the damn door!" Riker hastened to obey. The rusted metal slammed shut with a clamor that rang out sharper than any gunshot in the confined space. Harlan offered no immediate words. He simply fixed his son with a prolonged stare, disappointment carved into every deepened line of his face. The silence stretched, viscous and oppressive as spilled crude. Prescott struggled to steady his ragged breathing. "I did exactly what you wanted. She's out. Finished." Harlan's response came without warning, a brutal, open-handed slap that cracked through the gloom like a whip. Prescott staggered sideways, cheek blazing with fire. "You accomplished nothing," Harlan hissed, voice low and venomous. "You lost the ledger, you squandered the money, and you dragged my name, our name, through the mud alongside you." Prescott's voice trembled, shame and terror wrestling for dominance. "I didn't mean... Magnus, he took it from me. I tried to get it back. They were everywhere surrounding us." Harlan's contempt was total, unyielding. You couldn't even control a crippled girl and a gang of burned-out bikers. Do you have the slightest grasp of what your failure has cost me? Riker shuffled backward instinctively, yearning to melt into the shadows and disappear. Harlan shifted his frigid gaze to him. "And you're the sole remaining witness, aren't you?" Riker swallowed hard, words deserting him entirely. Harlan turned to one of the dark-clad enforcers.
This mess requires cleaning. My associates will recover the ledger, but we need a scapegoat." He nodded towards Riker with glacial indifference. "He shoved the girl. He acted alone. My son attempted to stop him." The enforcer inclined his head, hand easing smoothly inside his jacket. Prescott stared in dawning horror as comprehension crashed over him. "Dad, you can't do this. He'll talk. He'll spill everything." Harlan's expression remained impassive. "He won't utter another sound." Riker's eyes flew wide in raw panic. For one frozen heartbeat, his mind raced in frantic circles. Then instinct overtook thought. Terror exploded through his limbs. He spun and bolted for the side exit. "Stop him!" Harlan snapped, voice cutting like a blade, but sheer dread lent Riker unnatural speed. He barreled through the door, spilling into the narrow alley, lungs already burning as his feet hammered the uneven pavement. He ran without direction, blindly, skin shredding against rusted wire and broken concrete, blood trailing in his wake, never risking a glance behind. Shouts echoed in pursuit, footsteps closing fast, Harlan's commanding tone promising swift and final retribution. Riker pushed onward until the town's fringes finally swallowed him whole. His universe contracted to searing pain, utter exhaustion, and one hammering refrain: "They're going to kill me." At last, lungs heaving and vision blurring, he collapsed behind a foul-smelling dumpster, body racked with uncontrollable shudders. Thoughts splintered into jagged fragments, bitter regret, paralyzing terror, fleeting images of Kaylani's defiant face, Prescott's spineless betrayal, Harlan's merciless decrees. Fingers shaking violently, he clawed for his phone, barely able to grip it. Memories surged unbidden. His own father, shattered and unemployed, humiliated over one irreversible mistake years past. He had never dreamed survival might demand groveling for mercy from the very family he had helped dormant. An off-siren wailed mournfully. Headlights swept across a distant roadway, briefly illuminating the night. Riker forced himself upright and lurched onward through the darkness, guided solely by desperate instinct, heart pounding against every lurking shadow. At last, drained of strength, bleeding freely, with no sanctuary remaining, he wove through overgrown backyards until a familiar narrow driveway materialized. The recollection struck like lightning. Jackson Reeves' garage, Kaylani's father, the man whose reputation warned against any provocation. Drawing on his last reserves, he crossed the shadowed yard and slumped against the back door. He pounded with frantic, weakening fists. Inside, Jackson snapped awake at the insistent noise. Hand closing around the pistol in the bedside drawer, he moved with silent precision, old military reflexes reawakened. He eased the door a fraction, revealing a crumpled figure collapsing at the threshold. "Please," Riker gasped, voice choked and ragged. Blood streamed down his arm, pooling in the weathered porch cracks. "Help me. They want me dead. He ordered it. Judge Vandermeer. Hide me. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Jackson's stare tightened, weary resignation flickering across his features. He kept the weapon lowered, but ready, tone measured and unyielding. "Get inside. Don't make a sound." Riker crawled over the threshold, collapsing in a heap on the kitchen floor. Jackson secured the lock and scanned the outer darkness warily. For a prolonged moment, only Riker's labored breathing disturbed the stillness. Jackson did not holster the pistol. "Start talking, now." Riker's voice broke entirely, tears carving paths through the grime on his face. "He's framing me for everything. He'll kill me unless I vanish completely. Please, Mr. Reeves, I have nowhere else." Jackson's stare turned flint hard. "After what you inflicted on my daughter, you're lucky I don't drag you back into that night." Riker dissolved in sobs, cradling his bloodied arm. "I'm sorry. I never meant real harm. I just wanted it all to end." Words poured out in a frantic torrent. They're coming for everyone who knows. They won't stop. Jackson paused, ancient soldier's instincts warring with raw paternal fury and a scarred sense of justice. At length, he lowered the blinds with deliberate calm, eyes cold as winter steel. Stay exactly where you are, not a peep. If any of this is a lie, you won't see morning. Riker nodded feebly, surrendering to bone-deep exhaustion and paralyzing fear. As the house settled into tense quiet once more, Jackson understood the enemy had infiltrated his sanctuary, pleading for mercy, erasing the clear divide between ally and adversary in smoldering ash.
Inside the basement, the air hung heavy with unspoken secrets, raw anxiety, and a tension that seeped into every shadowed corner. Kalani Reeves sat in her wheelchair beside the sturdy wooden table, her injured leg carefully elevated, complexion still ashen, yet her eyes burned with unquenchable fire. Magnus Blaze Kerrigan stood sentinel behind her, arms crossed over his broad chest like an immovable guardian. Riker Thorne huddled on the edge of a worn armchair, trembling beneath the threadbare army blanket, his bloodied hands and blotched face betraying utter exhaustion and gnawing guilt. Jackson locked the basement door with a resonant click that sealed the moment in finality. For a suspended instant, silence reigned absolute. Jackson turned the ledger slowly in his hands. "Start talking," he commanded, voice low and edged with lethal calm. Riker nodded convulsively, swallowing a torrent of regrets. Prescott and his dad, they control everything. The gambling, the money, it all funnels through the swim team. The town's elite, teachers, even the principal, they all take their cut. Every meet, every record shattered, they wagered on the results. Kalani, she kept winning, kept smashing marks that bled their profits and exposed their fragility. They claimed it was unfair, that someone like her wasn't meant to triumph. Kalani's voice, fragile yet resolute, sliced the thick air. "So, you decided to eliminate me." Riker's shoulders convulsed. Prescott insisted if you were sidelined, hurt, removed, whatever, he could claim state, secure the scholarship, salvage his father's standing, and balance the books. I never thought it would escalate that far. I swear. Pain coursed through Kalani, not merely the throbbing in her leg, but a profounder betrayal that clawed at her core. She pressed her lips into a thin line, denying tears any release. "All this for money?" Riker buried his face in his hands. "Not only money, power, status. His father, he won't hesitate to kill to protect it." Jackson spread the ledger open on the table. Magnus leaned closer, features hardening as page after page unveiled meticulous records of payoffs, coded wagers, and clandestine transfers. Yet something else seized Jackson's attention. Columns of figures and initials that initially confounded. He fixed on Riker. "These abbreviations, these scores." Riker's reply emerged hollow, defeated. "SATs, ACTs." The judge didn't limit himself to swim meets. He manipulated test scores for children of wealthy parents who paid handsomely. Teachers and administrators rubber-stamped it. Anyone threatening exposure was silenced, with money or worse. Kalani stared at the pages, revulsion and incredulity warring across her face. "How many knew?" Riker shook his head, despair etched deep. "Enough. No one dared intervene. It's been entrenched for years." Jackson's knuckles blanched as he turned more pages. There, unmistakable, Principal Lockwood's name, Judge Harlan Vandermeer's initials, and a network of influential figures bound by bribes, fabricated grades, and veiled intimidation. Magnus exhaled a low whistle, barely contained fury simmering. "This surpasses small-town graft. It's full-blown organized crime." Kalani gripped the armrests, voice quivering yet unwavering. "We cannot allow them to bury this." Jackson nodded, expression grave. "The ledger alone won't suffice. They'll dismiss it as fabrication." Riker lifted his gaze, desperation flickering. "Prescott, he documented everything, bragged constantly, needed trophies. He recorded the attack on you, Kalani, stored it in the cloud, said it was so he'd always have something to remember you by. twisted. Kalani suppressed a shudder. The recollection of Prescott's chilling, possessive stare sent ice through her veins. She steadied herself. The password? Riker faltered. He never shared it. He was always obsessed with you. Talked about you endlessly, long before any of this. Silence stretched taut. Then realization dawned in Kalani's eyes, laced with revulsion and clarity. I know it, almost certainly. My birthday, month, day, year. He pried for it incessantly, joked it was his lucky charm. Jackson regarded her, concerned, tempered by swelling pride. You certain you're ready for this, kid? Kalani nodded, voice steady as steel. He sought to erase me. Now I'll erase him. Magnus rested a reassuring hand on Kalani's shoulder. Retrieving that video won't be simple. School systems are fortified, especially amid this uproar. Jackson nodded, mind already charting paths. Will require direct access, a terminal in the main office, deep into the night. In, extract a file, out before Calder's men suspect. Riker wiped his eyes, voice thick. I'll assist however possible. Just don't let them find me. Kalani's stare remained unrelenting. You'll do far more than assist. You'll testify, every detail. Otherwise, you're no different from them. Riker nodded, broken yet resolute. I will. I promise. Outside, the low growl of motorcycles reverberated through the stillness. The basement had transformed into a war room, boundaries between right and wrong etched indelibly. Jackson closed the ledger, jaw resolute. We move tonight. This concludes on our terms. Kalani drew a deep breath, physical pain eclipsed by surging purpose. She had been their prey. Now she would become their reckoning. Night descended heavily on Brook Ridge, draping the high school in deep shadow and hush, broken only by the intermittent flicker of security lights along its weathered red brick facade.
The campus, typically alive with the untroubled echoes of adolescent laughter and fleeting dramas, now thrummed with an undercurrent of unmistakable peril. This was no sanctuary for hesitation or frailty. Every moment demanded unflinching resolve. Jackson Reeves guided Kalani's wheelchair through the suffocating darkness, its wheels whispering over fractured asphalt as they advanced in measured silence. He moved with the ingrained discipline of a lifelong soldier, senses heightened to a razor's edge, every shifting shadow weighed for concealed danger, every distant sound catalogued and dismissed or noted. Magnus's voice cut through the earpiece from the shadowed van, concealed just past the overgrown baseball field. Westlot's clear. 2 sentries by the gym. Keep low. Avoid their sight lines. Kalani's face remained drawn and pale beneath the faint moonlight, jaw clenched in unyielding determination. Dressed entirely in black, her damaged leg bound securely against further strain, physical pain had been relegated to a remote concern. Tonight, the pursuit of justice eclipsed all else. She held the battered laptop pressed firmly to her chest, gaze riveted on the school's looming main entrance, unblinking. Jackson paused at the lot's perimeter, conducting a methodical sweep with eyes long trained to detect anomaly. The figures stationed near the gym wore regulation security attire, yet Jackson identified them instantly as mercenaries, their bulk deliberate, postures coiled with professional vigilance, eyes scanning with the sharpness of men paid for outcomes, not hours. Hired enforcers beholden to Vandermeer's influence. He held his breath in calculated patience, timing the rhythm of their patrols, then maneuvered Kalani behind a thick barrier of hedges. She reached for his hand, squeezing with quiet ferocity, whispering, "We face this as one." They infiltrated via a secondary entrance, the lock surrendering without protest to Jackson's practiced touch and a slender length of wire. The interior felt unnaturally forsaken, residual echoes haunting the polished tile corridors like lingering accusations. Locker doors hung ajar in silent reproach, resembling wounds that refused to heal. Each darkened classroom preserved spectral remnants of what had been irreparably lost. Trust eroded, safety violated, innocence shattered beyond repair. A bulky silhouette materialized farther down the hall, approaching with heavy, indifferent steps. Jackson pressed himself flat against the cold metal lockers, drawing Kalani protectively close, shielding her form with his own. The guard lumbered past, boredom etched in his sluggish gait, utterly oblivious to the subtle glint of wheelchair spokes or the fierce, unwavering purpose blazing in Kalani's eyes. They proceeded undeterred to the server room, a formidable steel barrier fortified by electronic keycard and a largely decorative rusted padlock. Jackson met her gaze. She nodded without hesitation. From her bag, she withdrew a compact bypassing tool and inserted it precisely into the mechanism. A faint electronic murmur, a satisfying click, and the door eased inward on well-oiled hinges. Within the confined windowless chamber, racks of servers emitted a constant low thrum. Monitors glowed with cascading lines of code and live surveillance feeds, mute custodians bearing witness to every concealed transgression the school had harbored. Jackson carefully lifted Kalani from the wheelchair, settling her before the primary terminal with steady, reassuring hands. "You absolutely certain you're prepared for this?" Kalani nodded firmly, fingers already blurring across the keyboard in confident rhythm. "He's far too arrogant, never bothered changing the factory defaults, and if I'm mistaken, will generate enough disturbance to force their hand." Jackson positioned himself at the threshold, Glock drawn and steady, every honed instinct attuned to the corridor's slightest disturbance. Kalani input her birth date, month, day, year. The interface responded with a soft, welcoming chime. Access granted. She was inside. She navigated deep into Prescott Vandermeer's cloud repository, sifting relentlessly through layered directories. Trophies, victories, defeats. Concealed beneath multiple subfolders lay the damning file, time-stamped precisely to the night of the assault. Though her hands trembled faintly, resolve held firm as she initiated playback. The screen illuminated the bridge, Riker's unsteady camera work, cruel laughter piercing the audio, Prescott's escalating taunts, culminating in that vicious command, "Let's see you swim, gold medalist." Kalani observed her own form hurled violently into the void, disappearing into churning blackness. Riker's expression twisted with sadistic glee, Prescott's sneer etched in triumphant malice, the incontrovertible proof. She commenced the transfer to the USB drive, pulse racing as the progress bar crept inexorably forward. Abruptly, a glaring crimson alert dominated the display. Security breach detected. Unauthorized access confirmed. Alarms erupted down the hallway, shrill, insistent, utterly unescapable. Emergency beacons strobed crimson through the narrow windows. Magnus's voice returned over the earpiece, laced with urgency. "Calder's forces converging fast. You've got 2 minutes, perhaps less." Jackson's countenance hardened to unyielding stone. He pressed the completed drive into Kalani's palm. "Take this. Magnus awaits at the field. Go, all speed, no looking back." Kalani clutched his arm desperately. "No, Dad!" He enveloped her hand in both of his, grip fierce yet tender. "You've borne this burden far too long, kid. You've unearthed the truth against all odds. Now ensure it survives." Heavy boots thundered closer down the corridor, accompanied by barked commands. Jackson stepped boldly into the hallway, firearm raised, his stance an unbreakable bulwark. He activated the earpiece. "Magnus, sending her to you now. Extract her safely." Kalani's throat tightened painfully, but she swallowed the protest, fully comprehending the gravity at stake. Jackson cast one final glance back, eyes alight with profound pride, intertwined with aching sorrow. "You're my daughter. Nothing in this world can change that." The clamor swelled as pursuit closed in. Jackson pivoted sharply, discharging a warning shot that echoed thunderously, deliberately drawing the assailants away from the server room. Kalani propelled herself through the side exit, emotion lodged like stone in her throat, USB clenched as though it were life itself. She burst into the enveloping night, scanning desperately for Magnus's unmistakable silhouette amid the concealing shadows. Behind her, shouts mingled with sporadic fire gun, reverberating through corridors of an institution that had failed utterly in its duty to shield her, yet in cruel irony had ultimately provided the very means for her counterstrike. Magnus's massive frame materialized from the gloom like a protector summoned from within. He swept Kalani effortlessly into his arms, carrying her swiftly across the exposed parking lot as distant headlights flared to life. Calder's cruisers revving aggressively, sirens soon to rend the darkness. Kalani's mind raced in frantic circles. Would her father emerge from this ordeal intact? Would the buried truth finally breach the surface into unforgiving light? As they vanished into the protective night, evidence secured, the key to dismantling an entire corrupt edifice, Kalani grasped the profound, visceral cost of wagering everything for even the slimmest hope of justice. Deep within the building, as faltering security lights dimmed and died, Jackson Reeves mounted his solitary, defiant stand, not merely as a humble mechanic or battle-hardened veteran, but as a father waging unrelenting war for the future his daughter had earned and deserved. The school courtyard blazed stark white beneath merciless police floodlights. Patrol cruisers formed an impenetrable ring around the structure, engines growling in low idle, radios crackling with clipped, urgent directives. Crimson and azure strobes ricocheted off weathered brick and gleaming glass, fracturing the night into jagged, disorienting fragments. Deputies fanned out methodically, weapons drawn and ready, their elongated shadows twitching with barely concealed unease.
At the heart of the chaos, Jackson Reeves advanced alone, hands elevated in surrender, shoulders unbowed. He did not flee. He emerged through the main doors with measured deliberation, ensuring every lens captured his composure, every onlooker registered his defiance, every fabricated narrative poised to unravel. Sheriff Calder strode forward to intercept him, jaw rigid, baton bangling loosely in his grip like a veiled threat. "Down on your knees," he bellowed, volume pitched for the gathering microphones and recording devices. Jackson descended slowly to the unforgiving pavement, gravel grinding into his palms. He maintained his gaze level and unflinching. In the distance, he discerned the fading whine of motorcycles retreating into safety. He pictured Kalani secured in Magnus's powerful hold, the USB drive clenched tightly in her grasp. That vivid image served as his anchor. Calder closed the gap and struck. The baton connected with a vicious crack across Jackson's ribs. The impact reverberated sharply, a sound both abrupt and conclusive. Jackson exhaled a low grunt yet refused to collapse. A second strike followed swiftly, then a third, each administered with calculated brutality. "Cease resisting!" Calder roared for the benefit of the cameras, though Jackson remained utterly motionless. A deputy clamped cuffs around Jackson's wrists, ratcheting them viciously tight until steel bit into flesh. Calder leaned in, breath hot with triumph, breaking and entering. "Property destruction, assault on law enforcement. You're finished." Jackson raised his head, a trickle of blood at his lip. "You're the one lying," he stated quietly, voice carrying unshakable certainty. Calder's smile widened, predatory. "That's precisely how this town operates."
From the lot's distant edge, Kalani observed, immobilized in Magnus's arms. Her mouth parted in a silent cry, raw anguish tearing at her throat, but Magnus's hand covered it with gentle yet immovable firmness. "Don't," he murmured, urgency and sorrow intertwined. "Don't diminish his sacrifice." Silent tears traced burning paths down Kalani's cheeks. She witnessed her father's knees falter momentarily, watched him hauled upright like a conquered prize. She saw cameras pivot hungrily to devour the scene. Magnus turned away, bearing her into concealing darkness as sirens swelled and the orchestrated deception drew its first breath. By morning, the narrative had already solidified. Screens throughout town blared identical headlines, endlessly looping the same distorted footage. Veteran turns rogue, launches late-night assault on high school. Commentators tutted disapprovingly. Pundits shook heads in rehearsed dismay. "A troubled history," one intoned. "Decorated service doesn't justify violence," another asserted. "A menace to public safety," the chairman proclaimed. Kalani observed from the rear of Magnus's van, the USB concealed beneath her brace, heart fracturing anew with each broadcast lie. They omitted the bridge entirely, erased the river, never uttered her name. They had no need. At the county detention center, the cell door slammed shut behind Jackson with the finality of a gavel. The space was cramped, illumination harsh and unrelenting. Jackson settled onto the narrow bench, breathing controlled, pain methodically catalogued and dismissed. He had endured far worse. What mattered now was time and the inexorable advance of truth through it. A guard paused outside the bars, curiosity warring with caution. "You're on camera," he informed. "They want a statement." Jackson rose and faced the mounted lens in the corner. He understood precisely who monitored such feeds and why. He elevated his hands deliberately, palms outward. Then his fingers moved in a precise, unmistakable sequence, a command that meant execute now. Beyond the concrete walls, past the web of falsehoods and glaring lights, engines ignited in distant places, devices vibrated with urgent alerts. Men and women downed by debts of life to Jackson Reeves took immediate notice. At the safe house, Magnus secured the door and cut the engine. Kalani wheeled herself inside, exhaustion a crushing weight, yet her eyes blazed with unquenched purpose. She connected the USB to the laptop, monitoring the file's transfer repeatedly. "This isn't over," she declared, voice firm despite the lingering ache. "They believe they've buried him." Magnus nodded gravely. "They've merely roused the wrong allies." Outside, motorcycles assembled in disciplined silence. Within, the evidence pulsed with latent power, awaiting dawn. Jackson Reeves sat solitary beneath the watchful camera, pain a steady throb, resolve utterly unbroken. No cage could contain a tiger, and truth once unleashed would not remain interred. By first light, an unfamiliar thunder rolled across secluded backroads and through Brookage's uneasy streets.
A thunder not born of storms, but of engines, ancient, defiant, resonating deep into the earth's very marrow, swept across the awakening town. The summons had rippled outward through the night. Magnus's call, transmitted across countless encrypted channels, passed from brother to brother, sister to sister, reaching every veteran and rider bound by debt or unspoken code. Each received it, and each answered without question. They arrived in relentless waves, solitary headlights piercing the lingering mist, patches and leathers spanning decades, chapters and lone riders alongside the spectral echoes of long disbanded units. Harleys, Indians, victories, each roar living memory, a solemn vow, a stark warning.
They flooded the streets, claimed the courthouse lawn, the adjacent park, and every surrounding inch of the police station, forming an unbroken sea of steel and unyielding purpose. From behind protective glass, Calder's deputies observed, fingers tightening nervously on batons as their false confidence withered with every fresh arrival. No voices rose in challenge, no violence erupted. Instead, they stood resolute, shoulder to shoulder, engines idling in a low, continuous growl, a silence more formidable than any war cry. Some bore American flags aloft, others lifted weathered photographs, faded unit portraits, tarnished service medals, the proud youthful grin of Jackson Reeves in desert camouflage, arms slung camaraderie style around a fellow soldier's shoulders. Grief, fierce loyalty, and righteous indignation mingled palpably in the morning air, an atmosphere impossible to dismiss. Magnus led them, broad-shouldered and commanding, his patch vivid in the rising light, gaze locked unswervingly on the police station's marble steps. Kaylani occupied the heart of the assembly, her wheelchair encircled by banners and gleaming chrome, hands gripping the microphone with white-knuckled determination despite the strain etched across her features. Every camera lens, every smartphone, every journalist amid the burgeoning throng now focused solely on her. The era of concealment had ended. Magnus spoke first, voice subdued, yet slicing cleanly through the hush. We stand for a brother who never turned from the fight. We stand for a daughter who refused to be silenced in the depths. We stand for every family they sought to crush beneath wealth and terror. The multitude responded with a low, rumbling murmur, like distant thunder poised to unleash. Kaylani swallowed hard, heart hammering so fiercely she feared it might rupture. She glanced at the compact laptop balanced on her lap, USB already inserted. A final look to Magnus, he nodded once, solemn promise and quiet benediction. She activated the microphone. I wasn't supposed to survive. They tried to erase me simply because I refused to yield, because my father instilled in me the imperative to fight for what is right, even when the world demands surrender. But the truth transcends us all, and you deserve to witness it unfiltered. She pivoted the laptop toward the assembly, its display mirrored onto an enormous LED screen transported by riders from 3 neighboring counties. The footage flickered, then resolved into chilling clarity. The bridge, Reichert's unsteady recording, Prescott's mocking laughter, the instant of ultimate betrayal captured eternally. Let's see you swim, gold medalist. Amplified through towering speakers, the audio boomed. A collective gasp rippled through the masses, swiftly overtaken by a surge of outrage, deeper and more piercing than any overt menace. Reporters pressed forward, transmissions broadcasting nationwide. Seasoned men and women, faces etched by memory and loss, wept without restraint. Veterans rendered crisp salutes. Inside the station, Calder monitored the feed going viral, pallor draining from his features. Deputies shifted uneasily. Some lowered weapons instinctively. Others retreated from windows, unable to confront the thousands of accusing eyes beyond the glass. Kaylani elevated her voice, fierce and unwavering. This is what they inflicted upon me. This is what they've done to countless others like me for years in shadowed secrecy, unchallenged, no longer. Magnus joined her, his resonant timbre carrying effortlessly. This town has languished under fear and enforced silence far too long. Today, that tyranny ends. If arrests are your aim, Sheriff Calder, begin with the judge. Begin with those who finance this depravity. He brandished the ledger high. Pages of documented corruption fluttered like formal accusations in the breeze. The oppressive quiet shattered, not in chaos, but in thunderous, authentic applause that rolled across the station like an irrevocable oath. National media, drawn inexorably to the spectacle, escalated coverage. Within minutes, the footage proliferated across television, social platforms, evening broadcasts. Phrases like systemic corruption, evidence of manipulation, and small-town conspiracy reverberated nationwide. Calder retreated to his office, panic contorting his expression. He snarled orders into his phone, "Shut it down! Cut the feed!" Yet no switch existed to silence what the world had already beheld. Kehlani elevated her USB to a correspondent from the Premier Network. "Do not permit editing. Broadcast everything." Beyond the barriers, the bikers maintained stoic silence, respectful, immovable, resolute. Their mere presence articulated what authorities refused to acknowledge. "We no longer fear you." As sunlight strengthened, additional flags unfurled. More families converged, voices multiplied in unified resolve. Kehlani's truth had transcended the personal, becoming collective, a swelling tide no badge, no firearm, no deception could restrain. By afternoon, initial black SUVs bearing FBI insignia appeared. Agents in immaculate suits emerged, briefcases in hand, navigating the crowd with purposeful efficiency, gathering testimonies, confiscating the ledger, securing the original recording. Federal authority had asserted itself. Antiquated local dominion lay shattered. Kehlani lifted her gaze skyward, tears glistening in the brightening day. Jackson's face beamed back from a photograph hoisted high amid the assembly, irrefutable testament that sacrifice retained profound meaning. As federal agents readied their initial briefing, the multitude held firm, aware at last that the scales of justice had irrevocably tilted toward retribution. Judge Harlan Vandermeer's office, once an inviolable haven of polished mahogany and ancestral portraits, had devolved into a desperate bunker. Papers scattered across the desk in frantic disarray.
Passports, bundled cash, car keys lay scattered across the desk in frantic disarray. On every screen, the footage of Prescott Vandermeer's crime replayed without mercy. The bridge, the terrified scream, the sickening splash, the world bearing witness. Kehlani Reeves's face dominated every broadcast. Phones throughout the courthouse vibrated incessantly with fresh waves of public fury. The law, once his impenetrable armor, had abandoned him entirely. Judge Harlan Vandermeer paced the worn carpet, movements sharp and erratic, betraying the panic he had mastered suppressing over a lifetime. Ancestral portraits lined the walls, stern judges, decorated soldiers, shrewd businessmen, gazing down with unblinking severity, and tonight, unmistakably accusatory. He scarcely registered the tentative knock before the door eased open. Prescott entered, eyes swollen and red-rimmed, posture stripped of its habitual arrogance, reduced to that of a frightened child. "Dad, what are we going to do?" His voice emerged small, fragile. Harlan did not lift his gaze. He continued cramming thick envelopes into a briefcase, fingers trembling as he counted stacks of bills. "You will remain here and face the consequences of your actions." Prescott's breath caught sharply. "Dad, please, I can't stay. They'll come for me." For a fleeting instant, Harlan paused. He regarded his son, revulsion and contempt swirling in his cold stare. "You sealed your fate the moment you hit record, Prescott. You handed them everything on a platter. If flight is your choice, then flee." "But you flee alone." Prescott reached out desperately. "Dad, don't abandon me here, please." Harlan recoiled as though touched by something vile. "You're worthless. The sole achievement of your pathetic existence has been the destruction of this family." He slammed the briefcase shut, knuckles blanching. Prescott staggered as if physically struck. Years of relentless pressure, calculated manipulation, veiled threats, all collapsed into one searing revelation. His father's regard had never been love, only utility, a tool now irreparably broken.
Harlan crossed to the window, parting heavy drapes to survey the mounting chaos below. Sirens wailed in escalating chorus. Red and blue lights pulsed along the avenue, converging inexorably. He glanced at his watch, jaw clenched in futile defiance. "You've cost me everything. Do not follow me, Prescott. If you appear, I will summon the authorities myself." He moved to the concealed safe behind an ancestral portrait, spinning the dial with sweat-slicked fingers, extracting dense bundles of crisp currency into a waiting duffel. He withdrew a second passport, another identity, another existence. Prescott watched in stunned disbelief as the man he had idolized transformed before him, no longer the unassailable judge, but a cornered fugitive. In that moment, the bitter truth crystallized. He had never truly mattered. Panic curdled suddenly into raw fury. Prescott lurched to the desk, seized the phone, and dialed a memorized number. His voice emerged hoarse, frantic. "Kehlani, it's me. I know where he's stashing the money. I know his escape route. If you want him stopped, come now." "Don't let him vanish. Don't let him harm anyone else." On the line, Kehlani's response came steady, almost compassionate. "Why help me now?" Prescott's words spilled in a torrent, half confession, half desperate atonement. "I was nothing but a pawn to him. I'm sorry for everything I did. I refuse to become him. Please, stop him." Before Kehlani could reply further, the windows shuddered under a new onslaught of sound. Dozens of police sirens merged with a deeper, more ominous wail. Unmarked SUVs and blue-jacketed agents screeched to halts in the driveway, fanning out in choreographed precision. Helicopters thrummed overhead, searchlights sweeping the grounds in blinding arcs. He glanced at his watch, jaw clenched in futile defiance. "You've cost me everything." What happened then happened divinely, plaintive and swift. Harlan froze, duffel half closed, eyes widening in the stark realization that every avenue of escape had been sealed. Hallways echoed with barked commands, badges flashing under harsh light. The estate was encircled, flight paths strangled by the very system he had once wielded as a weapon. He whirled towards Prescott, rage and terror contorting his features. "What have you done?" Prescott offered no response. He merely slumped into the leather chair, hollow and expended. Downstairs, the front door splintered under forceful entry, agents surging into the foyer. Boots pounded up the staircase in relentless cadence. Harlan released the duffel. It thudded to the floor. For one final moment, he surveyed the family portraits he had sacrificed everything to uphold. When the FBI breached the office door, weapons trained, commands sharp, he raised no defense. Outside, news vans converged hungrily. Above, the morning sky blazed with an unforgiving clarity that felt like divine verdict. In that instant, the old mighty judge Harlan Vandermeer, mastermind of ruin, guardian of buried sins, comprehended the desolate meaning of absolute isolation.
Rotting planks creaked underfoot, rusted cleats jutting like forgotten teeth, the heavy scent of oil and sodden timber saturating the air. Fog clung low to the water, muffling sound and erasing distance in equal measure. This forsaken marina was where Judge Harlan Vandermeer had chosen to flee, where he convinced himself the past could never pursue him. He stumbled along the weathered dock, duffel bag slung heavily over one shoulder, breath ragged and uneven, shoes skidding on slick boards. Ahead, a modest motorboat bobbed restlessly against its moorings, engine already warmed and primed, freedom mere meters away. "Don't move." The command sliced through the mist with surgical precision. Harlan froze. Jackson Reeves emerged from behind a pile of weathered crab traps, stance relaxed yet coiled, gaze locked unyieldingly. The man who'd been hauled from a school courtyard in cuffs mere hours earlier now stood liberated, released under the crushing weight of public outcry.
Bruises shadowed his ribs, a fresh cut traced his cheek. None of it diminished him. Beside Jackson, Magnus materialized like a shadow given solid form, leather vest taut, arms crossed, immovable as granite. Harlan's hand darted instinctively to his coat. The pistol emerged swiftly, too swiftly for a man who'd long believed fear alone sufficed as defense. He leveled it toward Jackson, finger whitening on the trigger, desperation incinerating whatever restraint remained. "You destroyed me!" Harlan spat. "You and that girl! I built this town. I own it!" He never fired. Jackson advanced a single step, wrist twisting in a blur. The weapon clattered across the planks and vanished into the depths with a muted splash. Harlan staggered backwards, shock unraveling his composure, suddenly confronting the truth. The figure before him was no mere mechanic, no helpless victim, but a predator who had extended mercy far too often. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Harlan snarled, scrambling for footing. Jackson closed the distance, voice flat and inexorable. "I know exactly who you are. That's why this ends tonight." In blind panic, Harlan lunged not at Jackson, but past him, lunging for the boat. Magnus intercepted like a slamming gate. Harlan shoved desperately at Magnus's shoulder and lost balance entirely. The dock betrayed him. He plummeted into the river with a raw scream, plunging into the same dark and gorged waters that had nearly claimed Kehlani's life. The splash rang sharp and conclusive. He surfaced thrashing, sodden coat dragging him downward, eyes wild with terror. "I can't swim! Help! Please help me!" The irony hung thick in the fog-shrouded air. Magnus advanced to the edge, boots planted firmly. He gazed down on the flailing man, watching raw fear strip away every vestige of arrogance. His jaw tightened. For one suspended moment, the river seemed to pause in anticipation. "Let him sink," Magnus murmured. Then a voice pierced the mist. "Dad!" Kehlani sat in her wheelchair near the dock's entrance, enveloped in an oversized jacket, hands trembling, yet eyes unwavering. She had witnessed it all, the drawn gun, the fall, the abject fear. "Pull him out! Don't do this! Don't let him steal anything more from us!" Jackson turned to her. "He doesn't deserve—" "No," Kehlani cut in, voice resolute. "We deserve better." The river surged again, submerging Harlan once more. He resurfaced, coughing, choking, all pretense of dignity obliterated. Jackson acted without further hesitation. He seized a coiled rope, dropped to one knee, and hauled Harlan aboard with ruthless efficiency, like retrieving a drowned beast from a snare. Harlan collapsed onto the planks, shuddering violently, drenched and hollow-eyed. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Camera floodlights pierced the fog as news crews arrived, illuminating the scene in stark, unforgiving white. Deputies rushed forward, weapons raised, then lowered upon comprehending the tableau. Cuffs clicked shut around Harlan's wrists. He offered no resistance, unable even to lift his gaze. Jackson loomed over him, breathing measured and controlled. "You never got to decide who mattered. You never did." Kehlani observed as they lifted Harlan to his feet, his once immaculate suit dripping river water in shameful rivulets. He appeared diminished now, shattered, utterly exposed. As he was led away, Harlan turned once, eyes meeting Kehlani's. No hatred remained, only naked fear. Cameras captured every second. Truth crystallized in the cold light. Justice, raw and undeniable, had prevailed. Yet as sirens receded and fog gradually lifted, Kehlani felt the familiar weight resettle in her leg, her bones, her future. Some triumphs bore scars no courtroom could heal. Jackson knelt beside her, forehead resting gently against hers. "It's over." Kehlani nodded, but her gaze lingered on the restless river, aware that certain currents never ceased their insidious pull. 6 months drifted past, seasons marked by relentless headlines and gradual healing, halting justice and lingering private sorrow.
The world marched onward, as it always had, indifferent to individual tempests. Yet for Kehlani Reeves, every dawn summoned the chill memory of icy water and the phantom clutch of the river's grasp. Some mornings she jolted awake, heart pounding, hands clawing for the surface, breathless, only to discover herself entangled in bed sheets rather than a merciless current. The courtroom had delivered its final decrees. Judge Harlan Vandermeer was condemned to life imprisonment, the sentence resounding through marble corridors like a resounding death knell for the entrenched order. Prescott, hollow-eyed and diminished, had been consigned to juvenile detention, a boy who once presumed ownership of the world, now merely another faceless number lost within the system. Sheriff Calder, divested of his badge, departed town under federal escort, his image systematically erased from every official record in Brookage. The community began tentative steps toward renewal, yet scars endured, indelibly woven into its collective conscience. For Kehlani, healing transcended mere mending of bone or closure of wounds. It demanded relearning trust in the world and, most crucially, in herself. Physicians were unequivocal. Her leg would never fully recover. She might walk, perhaps even run with a pronounced limp, but elite competitive swimming lay forever beyond reach. Each approach to the pool triggered visceral recall, the suffocating panic, the relentless undertow, the numbing paralysis, the helpless whirl. Her existence had contracted to solid ground, and the confinement gnawed at her relentlessly. Yet certain obligations, like hope itself, refused to fade. It was Magnus who first proposed therapeutic immersion. "Your body remembers the water, kid," he said softly over steaming mugs of cocoa at the old kitchen table. "Let it teach your mind anew. You're not shattered, you're transformed." Jackson concurred, though doubt shadowed his eyes. "We'll go together, first session back. You won't face it alone." The day arrived on a crisp, brilliantly cold morning, clouds trailing long shadows across the pool's serene azure. The rehabilitation center welcomed with gentle warmth. Chlorine mingled with the subdued hum of encouragement. Children and elders navigated the water with tentative bravery. This realm felt kinder, pressures dissolved in ripples and soft laughter. Kehlani paused at the edge, fingers gripping the rail until knuckles paled. Her reflection wavered below, unfamiliar, a young woman forged from fractured pieces, held together by unyielding determination. Jackson knelt beside her, hands steady on her shoulders. "Only if you're ready." She wavered, fear constricting her chest. For an instant, the river resurfaced in vivid torment, stealing her breath. Then Magnus's hand settled on her back, warm, anchoring. "I'm here too," he murmured, voice low and reassuring. "Your dad's right. You'll never have to do this solo." Supported by both, Kehlani eased into the water. Coolness enveloped her legs, rising to her waist. Her pulse raced as it lapped against her scar. Yet beneath the dread, a new sensation stirred, liberation. For the first time since the assault, the water did not drag her down. It buoyed her. She advanced cautiously, palms skiving the silken surface. Jackson remained close, poised to intervene. Magnus, now Uncle Magnus in their oddly expanded family, observed from poolside with quiet pride. Across the room, the door opened. Riker Thorne entered hesitantly, awkward in clean clothes and a shy half-smile. He clutched a modest bouquet of daisies, gathered with evident care. He waited until Kehlani rested at the shallow end before approaching. "I wanted to see you," he said, subdued, "to say I'm sorry, face to face. I can't undo it, but I'm trying to become better. I needed you to know." Kehlani's gaze remained cool, unwavering. She allowed the silence to linger, then inclined her head once. "Thank you. You'll carry what you did forever. Make it mean something."
Relief and lingering guilt warred across his features as he swallowed. "I will." She watched him depart, understanding that forgiveness did not obliterate history, yet it occasionally unlocked the path ahead. The ensuing weeks unfolded in measured, promising increments. Kehlani rediscovered her affinity for the pool, not in pursuit of records or accolades, but in reclaiming fragments of self stolen by trauma. Each deliberate step on tiled deck, each tentative stroke rebuilt her foundation. Riker returned periodically, performing modest tasks at the center, guiding younger children toward their own bravery in the water. It was a modest atonement, yet profoundly significant. One quiet afternoon, with the pool nearly deserted, Kehlani grasped the edge and turned to Jackson. "I want to try." Jackson smiled, pride eclipsing concern. "I'm right here. Go only as far as feels right." She launched gently at first, limbs recalling ingrained rhythms. Scars protested with dull ache, but her determination burned brighter. Midway, the water embraced her, tender, yielding, utterly unlike the river's fury. She reached the opposite wall breathless, then returned. Upon surfacing, Jackson wept unashamedly. Magnus cheered with such volume a nurse startled nearby. Riker applauded, face alight with the fragile glow of renewed possibility. Kehlani laughed, a clear, revitalized sound. For the first time in months, buoyancy returned, not triumphant or invincible, but vibrantly alive within her own resilient form. She turned to Jackson, water beading on her forehead. "I did it!" He nodded, voice thick with emotion. "You did." In that instant, Kehlani recognized her true gold medal, not forged metal or fleeting headlines, but the profound, quiet valor of persistent forward motion. Sunlight danced across the surface, casting fractured prisms on her skin. She closed her eyes, absorbing the warmth, and understood no judicial decree could bestow this gift. No court, no jury, no ovation. Only herself.
2 years had passed since the river, since the trials that shook Brookage to its foundations, since the night the truth finally broke the surface and refused to sink again. The Tom had changed in quiet, irreversible ways. The old aquatic center bore a new nameplate at its entrance, the Kehlani Reeves Community Pool. Scholarships funded by settlements and community donations now carried young swimmers from every corner of the county, kids who might never have dreamed of lanes and starting blocks. Corruption's roots had been pulled up, exposed to the light. Some had withered, others had been replaced by something sturdier. Kehlani Reeves stood at the edge of the competition pool during the inaugural meet held in her honor, no longer in a racing suit but in a simple coach's jacket, her limp barely noticeable now after countless hours of rehabilitation. She watched a nervous 12-year-old girl from the east side of town, dark-skinned, wide-eyed, gripping borrowed golden goggles, step onto the block for her first race. The girl's mother waved frantically from the stands, the same way Jackson once had for Kehlani. Jackson stood beside her, arms crossed, grease still faintly under his fingernails despite the scrubbed hands. The garage had grown too, now a training hub for veterans finding their way back to civilian life. Engines and second chances, rebuilt side by side. Magnus leaned against the bleachers nearby, beard grayer but eyes just as sharp, his brothers scattered throughout the crowd like quiet sentinels who had earned the right to simply watch. The starter's horn sounded. The girl dove clean, stroked strong and unafraid. When she touched the wall first, the applause rose not in scattered politeness but in genuine thunder, the kind once reserved only for certain names, certain families. Kehlani smiled, a quiet, steady curve that held no bitterness. She knew the water still carried echoes, cold nights, swollen currents, the weight of hands that tried to hold her under, but it also carried forward motion, buoyancy earned through struggle, the unbreakable truth that depth does not have to mean drowning.
She turned to her father. She swam like she belonged here. Jackson nodded, voice thick. Because she does. Because you showed her she does. As the sun lowered over the renovated stands, casting long golden reflections across the pool, Kehlani understood that her story had never truly been about medals or records or even justice alone. It was about refusing to let the river, the world, decide who gets to rise. Some victories are loud, headlines, handcuffs, headlines fading. Others are quieter. A young girl surfacing with lungs full of air and possibility, believing for the first time that the water will hold her. And in that enduring current, steady, relentless, life-giving, Kehlani Reeves found her truest gold, not in what she had overcome, but in what she now helped others begin.